Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful if you're still here. It is the full moon transmission. Today is January 28th, 2021. And I lost the feed for some reason, so I had to go back and do it over again. So I'm going to drop the link real quick here again in the social media land so that it can be accessible to those who want it to be accessible. Let's see what's going on here. There we go. Excellent condition, it says now. So that's great. And we'll see if we can stick with this weird energy going on. You can tell that Mercury is soon to go retrograde, I feel like, because it is coming to a standstill and things are just, in terms of communication, in terms of electronic communication, all of the wires and digital information moving and the data moving, it is starting to slow down and move into this review period. So I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to this full moon transmission. We're going to talk about the astrology. We're going to talk about this very strange reading that has taken me some real time to interpret as it comes out, and use my own astrology to really show how you can use your chart to make sense of these major transits. So full moons, of course, are a release point, but they're also a culmination point. They are the moment in the lunar cycle when the moon is at her fullest reflection by the light of the sun. So that which the moon represents the subconscious, the underlying layers, the emotional landscape, our personal experience, and it's very transient, right? Because the moon moves through a degree every 2 hours or so, and so our feelings also flow just like the water. There's no stagnation, and there's always movement. And so of course, when we have full culmination of the intentions that we set of our personal and emotional growth over the lunar cycle, then we not only get to have full reflection on what is otherwise hidden for a lot of the times or hasn't fully developed, but it does at the same time come to a culmination. And that is when we get to see what we need to release and what is it that we are able to hold on to, and not in a hoarding or obsessive type of way, but what we have grown over the course of this cycle so far that is worth holding on to because it has to do with our growth. Now, if you remember again from the new moon in Capricorn, this commitment to a transcendent goal is about everything being stripped away from us intentionally. We make the choice to leave behind all of the institutions and all of the growth, everything that we have built as a society. We choose to leave it behind in order to focus on our spiritual growth and transcendence. That is what the new moon in Capricorn represented. So as we come into this full moon, we see clearly where we are emotionally at this point. And we are in Leo, the Aquarius Leo axis. Oh boy, this is about the sovereign individual versus the expression of that sovereign individual through the collective process. Right, the Leo and the fifth house and the sun ruling Leo. So the sun is in its detriment in Aquarius, right? The sun is at home with Leo. That is where it's meant to be. That is its home territory. So the sun in Aquarius is actually at its detriment. It is not at its full power at this point. And then meeting Jupiter as well, which rules a fire sign as well. They're coming together in opposition to the moon. So these aspects of sovereign individual expression, creative self-expression, not entirely the ego consciousness, because that is more of the Aries archetype, but we're talking about almost like a rebirth as a result of everything that the individual consciousness has learned over the course of its journey through the bottom of the chart, through Aries all the way to Leo. And once we get to Leo in the 5th house, this is where the individual consciousness combusts, right? Combustion and release is these are the main experiences with the Leo archetype, just like the sun. The sun, in a way, is participating in its own form of combustion and release. It's not technically combustion, it's technically nuclear fusion. But the idea is that there is a chemical reaction that releases heat. And with the individual in Leo, the chemical reaction is about the individual personality really coming into full expression of itself. And so the 5th house is about taking risks. It's about daring actions. It is about romance and play. It is about the heart, and not in an emotional way, but if the muscle that pumps the blood through the system, right? And what does blood do? It does a lot of things, but one of the things it does is come to the surface and release heat and energy as well. And so the beginning of Leo is blood rushing to the head. And the full expression of Leo is when this creative self-expression that moves through the individual is really the divine energy moving through the person. The idea that if we are connected to our own sovereign nature, we provide a vessel in order for this energy to move through us, the divine energy. And so in the tarot, the Leo card is passion, it's lust, it's strength as well, depending on which deck you're using. So the Sun and Jupiter, though, in Aquarius like this, like I said, they are not at their most power. They don't have a lot of strength and oomph behind them in Aquarius, but they are coming together. And so this is a major expansion of this, the way that we are expressing ourselves through the collective experience. That is what Aquarius represents. Now, Aquarius is about contribution and management of that contribution. So the individual sovereign being is contributing their sovereign individual nature to the full expression of and through the collective. The collective is able to hold the space for the individual to express, for us as individuals to express ourselves through the collective. That is what the 11th house and the Aquarian archetype represents. And so with Jupiter meeting the sun here, there is leadership, there's expansion, there's fortune, there's good luck in a certain way that Jupiter represents, the defender of our collective values and belief systems. Well, this degree of Aquarius and this full moon is really about a reality check, because there's a difference between ideals and archetypes and reality and actual human beings. And the highest version of Aquarius is to somehow not just live in the archetypes, but to actually have full, sovereign, organic human beings in their highest potential expressing themselves. And that is what creates the cohesion of the collective, rather than the ideals that we kind of project out onto other people. And this full moon today is showing us, it's showing us how much, it's showing us who we are, who other people are, and having to come to the realization that as much as we have these ideals that we prop up, and as much as we project those ideals onto certain people, and as much as we even want to be or see ourselves as the embodiment of these ideals, we actually have to, in order to really fulfill the highest version of Aquarius, we have to step outside of those ideals and deal with reality and deal with people as they actually are, because otherwise it's all surface level and it's hive mind collective consciousness, not fully empowered sovereign beings coming together into a collective. And with Jupiter as well in this position, coming to meet the sun, this is going to expand and illuminate the leadership in terms of them being actual people and having to come to terms with the reality of what they represent, as opposed to the idealism that has been projected upon them. Now, with it Leo in this degree, in the opposition that it where the moon is, there is a strong sense here of coming out of the darkness, right? The morning dew, right, on the morning dew on the grass at dawn, right? The idea that water, see water coming back around again, lots of water, lots of emotions, lots of intuition, lots of feeling, lots of connection to the creative, magical process within us. The idea here is that the morning dew glistening on the grass at dawn, shows us that we have made it through the darkness, and that is a signal that the sun is now coming up. The water that had been, starting to shift and change form as a result of the change in temperature, and that's, and the change in air pressure and all that stuff that has to do with why there is dew on the grass in the first place, that it's a signal that the sun is rising, okay? And that internally and emotionally, we all are in this moment here where we have an opportunity to realize the transformation that is possible, okay? But it's definitely an exalted feeling, and it's a potential culmination of a process that began with a crisis, right? And creation means transformation, okay? And the building of a new society is just as much of an artistic process as it is anything else. And so this is the individual soul each of us realizing that we have successfully passed through the long night, and that has been testing our strength and faith, right? So now we get to see what about that has culminated, and what about that needs to be released in order for us to move forward. And that's an individual process. But what I will say is that, again, it's going to be wrapped up in the release of the ideals and meeting people exactly where they are as human beings. And when it comes to Jupiter, we are talking about the leadership and the expansion of that leadership and the role that Jupiter plays as a leader of the cultural values, and the sun being our spiritual fulfillment as well, which is hard. Like I said, the sun is in its detriment in Aquarius. It's not very powerful here necessarily. And so there's getting a boost and an expansion to a certain extent with Jupiter, but it also is illuminating that aspect of the leadership. And we have to be starting to be very real about things, and not projecting onto other people our own archetypes, our ideals, including ourselves. So from a personal perspective here, I'm going to be very real. Like I am struggling, right? Like internally, there's everything on the outside of me is just fine. There's a lot of growth. There's a lot of newness. There is a lot of movement. There is nothing here that I have to worry about in terms of my material realm. But the first house is Aquarius. I'm first house Aquarius. Okay. That's my ascendant. The moon, is in my 7th house on my natal Jupiter. Jupiter is my ruling planet. So I have the really strong, aspect of Jupiter right now, the defender of our collective values, a leadership, in terms of collective values and, social values, right? And coming together, there's a lot of this here, and there's a big conflict and opposition here between how I identify myself and show myself to the world in terms of, embodying an ideal versus reality, and then in an opposition to the moon sitting on my natal Jupiter, which is, in the seventh house, has a lot to do with, the individual person is very much wrapped up in the social, in their identity being connected to social values, right? And collective belief systems, and an expansion on that as well. And so I am really feeling this tug and this pull between who I am as a person and who I am in terms of the shared experience, and having to really come to terms with the ideal versus the reality of who I am and how I feel about my role within the social realm, and the leadership potential, and how much of how I engage with people is much more on a social collective level as opposed to necessarily an individual. So Jupiter in the seventh house has a lot to do with that. The fact that your relationships, your partnerships are much more expansive in a larger social context as opposed to maybe other planets or points that would be in your seventh house. Okay, so I'm really feeling this tug. Now let's talk about the T-square to Mars and Taurus. This is right now, this degree is about the cultivation of our consciousness, right? It's about watering the flowers, the garden of the mind right now. And Mars is really not happy in this position because Mars wants to be a warrior, and it is being forced in some ways, archetypally and symbolically, to really focus in on the natural process, the actual material world, and cultivating the mind. Well, this part of Taurus is my third house. And so this T-square with Mars where it is today is going to be the arbiter here. And so what does that mean? Well, in a general sense, it means that the way to release the tension of this opposition, and to realize the culmination through a social crisis when it comes to our individual sovereignty, has to do with being able to slow down enough to cultivate the ego consciousness, to water the flowers, to tend to the garden of the mind, and our own ego consciousness. Because otherwise, this push and pull here, this opposition is, it can really lead to, some feelings of not being able to see. I think it can be very damaging, and well, I wouldn't say damaging, that's not the right word. I would say could be very destructive to the individual sense of feeling and emotions, to have Jupiter and the sun here having to highlight the ideal versus the reality. And so we can, if we are willing to put that creative potential energy of Mars, right, that warrior energy towards the cultivation of the natural process, I think that this will really help ease the tension in this opposition, because not everybody is going to necessarily feel the culmination. They're not necessarily going to see that creation is transformation. They're not going to necessarily see that there is, that we are at the dawn from the long night that came from a crisis. We can really mitigate this with Mars in this position. Okay, so Venus is also going to meet Pluto today, and this, a lot of water, a lot of sensitivity, a lot of sensuality, right? Pluto rules Scorpio. There's a lot of desire and a hunger and obsession with Scorpio, because it's really about getting down to the bottom of things, and this is the this is the power of our transformation, is Pluto. And Venus is what we value, who we value, what appeals to our senses, what do we draw to us that we value. And she does not like to feel uncomfortable. But when she meets Pluto, this is very creative, artistic, and transformative as well. And so you can see how these two aspects coming together can really activate the idea of transformation is the creative process, okay? Because we have to go through the process of death and rebirth in order to create something. You know, it is the interaction of the duality that is the death and rebirth cycle. And these two coming together are really showing us and activating our ability to feel into the natural flow through all of life. This is the creative process that or not the creative process, this is the creative potential that we can tap into artistically and creatively. Because Venus is very much about artistic qualities, okay? You know, if you have Venus in your 10th house, for instance, which is, you know, the Capricorn house, if you have Venus in your 10th house, for instance, this really points to a career and a mission, and a collective effort towards artistic pursuits, right? Venus loves what's beautiful. And so there is a transformation process that is the cornerstone of creation. These two things fit together. And so this conjunction today with Venus and Pluto is really going to activate that. Again, if we see that transformation is a creative process and that going through the crisis, going through the darkness is part of the transformation as well. Again, it's not exactly it doesn't always feel the best. And, you know, with this full moon, this is a release point. We have to release the things that are not allowing us to be creative, to tap into our creative potential, to allow for the transformation. And again, that means not holding on to the archetypes as the only representation. We have to meet ourselves and each other in real life and with who we are and stop projecting our ideals onto other people. So that's the basis of the full moon astrology today. And of course, the moon is going to square Uranus. It's going to square Mars, you know, these fixed squares. And it is a trine to Chiron today as well. And so a lot of fire that could really easily disperse itself very quickly if we do not manage it with other energy. Of course, Neptune is still in a square to the nodes, but it's starting to release because Neptune is moving direct and the nodes are moving retrograde as they do. And now the nodes are in new degrees, okay? We've gone now from this, you know, buffet style when it comes to information that we can just consume. And now we've moved back to a degree that has much more to do with connecting to all of the information that ever has been, right? To the larger planetary mind, whatever that means to you, right? That could be telepathy, that could be connecting to all of the information. And this isn't about consuming it now. This isn't about having access to all of it. It is about going within and being able to access it without necessarily doing anything about it, okay? This is important because, again, we're going through this Gemini North Node for another year. And so this aspect is really this ability to work as the magician, right? This mercurial energy that has to do with working with the duality of idea and thought and the dialectic as nothing more than data points. And now it's really going to be not about consuming those data points because they're presented to us, but now it's about stepping back and just allowing and clearing our minds and allowing ourselves to access all of the data points without necessarily consuming them or even having them presented to us that we can engage with. It's much more about accessing it. And this is going to require, again, this is part of the creative process and the transformational process as well. Do we trust that the table is set where Neptune is? Are we going to allow ourselves to hang loose here and know that at the right time we're all going to sit down with our peoples and have our meal, right? That means trusting that everything is happening according to God's plan, whatever that means to you, divine source. You know, you don't have to identify it as God. It's just, I spent a long time not being able to even say the word God without like flinching, and having some kind of cringe experience. And that's, we all go through our process, but you have to come to terms with what that means to you. If you have a sense of something more than who you are, and at the same time you embody that, that is what God is, divine source, whatever, however you identify it. And this has nothing to do with the church, so or any organized religion. So get that out of your mind. It's an interesting time, and the reality is that this full moon is showing us how far we have come, because it's only been 2 weeks and it feels like a lifetime since the new moon, right? So we see here what it is we have to release in order to actually give ourselves to access the creative potential. And Pluto and Venus coming together today is making it, I wouldn't say easy, but it's making it simple. They're coming together and allowing that transformational process to be very palpable in the world that we value and the people we value and our senses, right? And it's in some ways it feels like it's increasing our sensitivity, making us more sensitive to the hidden natural energy that flows through all of life, the Reiki energy, if you want to think about it that way, the occult energy, if you want to think about it that way, the hidden energy from our five senses, something more intuitive, something more psychic, something that is a current that runs throughout all life. Water is life. And when we can access that, then the things can fall away that we don't need anymore. And we can actually move into a creative process of transformation. Okay, so let's check in with the chat here really quick. Yay, I did get it working again, Meg. Yeah, that was really weird. And I'm kind of glad because I had to get my head straight just a little bit before I could give this, because like I said, I mean, part of what I do is just be authentic and real and not, front like just because I do this work means that I have it all figured out. And I'm, this full moon is really bringing a lot up for me. And in terms of who I am versus who I am in the context of the shared experience and having my ruling planet Jupiter be so directly involved with this full moon, I feel a lot of pressure. Like a lot of pressure right now, and a lot of, disconnect. That's what I dreamt about. I won't go into the details, but it was just like, where have you been? Because I might be doing this work, but it's pretty clear that I'm losing connection with that creative and magical side of myself. And this is what we all need. We all need to reestablish this connection right now. In order to really bring about the reality that we all want to be in. Okay, so let's go into the reading, because it's really bizarre, and like I said, I had a really hard time making sense of this. So happy full moon, everybody. I know that everybody's going to have a different experience of this. And so, but what I will say is that this is a return in some ways to who we truly are. That's really the takeaway here, is this full moon is showing us who we really are and allowing us to let go of all of the aspects that aren't real to us anymore. Because we can project ideals onto ourselves. This is really a big part of where I'm at. We can project ideals onto ourselves all day long. But if we don't actually come home to who we really are and express who we really are, it doesn't really matter. And then the Aquarian collective experience is nothing more than stripped of its individuality, and it's just a Borg hive mind that is rooted in fear, right? People following the line out of fear or not being tapped into who they are and just mindlessly engaging in activities that are escapist as well. That's the other thing, is that when you're not attached to if you're not connected to who you truly are, you just, there is all kinds of stuff that you can engage in. And technology is really supporting that, unfortunately. So we have to be mindful of who we are so that we do not allow ourselves to be taken over by somebody else's algorithm of who they think we are, right? That is the dark side of Aquarius, is the loss of individuality and sovereignty for the sake of some collectivism that has no real organic structure and is just projected onto us of who we should or shouldn't be. And fear is a big motivator for people to stay in that place. And when you strip people of their individual sovereignty, then they don't even know that they're not free. That's the other thing. So we've come a long way, and now we get to see who we really are. And then with Mercury going retrograde in just 2 days, this is going to be an incredible review point in terms of how we engage with information and knowledge and communication. Okay, and the degree that Mercury is at right now is about the delicacy of feeling. That's the thing about Aquarius in its highest version, that's not disconnected from the water. It is the water bearer. It is completely about bringing the water, holding the water. It's not dried up. It is holding all of this emotional and intuitive potential, this connection, this emotional connection. The water bearer. It's kind of interesting. In some ways, it's got this Cancerian thing to it, right? Because Cancer is the container. And so Aquarius is the larger context of the collective holding these individual containers that hold our individual vulnerability. Wow, that's interesting. I hadn't actually considered that until just now. So I think I will consider that further. Okay. And thank you all for being here and holding space for each other, holding space for me. I want nothing more than to just be myself. And I think if we can all do that, we'll be a lot better off, and not suppressing who we are just to make other people happy or to act like we have it all figured out. Because what do you learn from that? You don't learn anything. So this reading is really about what happens when we're not connected to who we really are, and how we can get connected back to that place. Because I mean, let's be real here. This really reflects a lot of my personal energy because it's so on the surface, but I know that I can't be the only one that's feeling these things and needs to have this message presented to them as well. And so if you're like, everything's great, I know who I am, and I am fully in awareness of that, and this full moon is like activating that for me, that's great. This is probably not the message for you. And this is about, for probably the majority of people, honestly, that are really coming to realize who they actually are, and having to compare that with the idealism that they thought was who they were, and realizing that that's just an archetype. It's not real. It's not organic. It's not in the soil, which is where Taurus is, right? And that is Mars, that is Uranus right now. And well, it was for a minute, it was Lilith. Now she's in Aries. So it's a different story. So coming into the moment, we have the Knight of Wands, but reversed. So the Fire of Fire. And so reversed, it can certainly be a lot of things, tyrannical and dogmatic and egotistical. All of the things that the Knight represents is the fire of the fire, the warrior. Look at this warrior. When it's reversed like this too, it does suggest that it is a big burn right away, and then it just burns out, right? Combustion, and the release without much else here. You just kind of blew it out in the first go, and then there's nothing left. The potential for that with Leo is very strong. because the blood is pumping and going to the head. And if we don't learn how to sustain that, it just comes out and is in one explosion, and then it's over. And so coming into the moment, I feel like not only is there a real distortion of this incredible, creative, courageous energy that we have with the Knight of Wands, it also does feel like that coming into the moment, there may have been a one big blast that is now dissipated, and we don't have any more fuel to light the fire now that it's been one big burn. It's like when you're trying to light a fire and you decide to either just douse the whole thing in lighter fluid and it goes up and then it just burns out just as quickly because there's nothing else substantial. This is what it feels like. And I do feel like that a lot of people, including myself, may have felt like in this position because there was a big push not that long ago to really be kind of this warrior and project out with this courage and this bravery and this spiritual transformation. And now it's a much more, it's either released itself to a certain extent or it has, it's released itself and there's not much else going on there, or we are just having a distorted view of what it means to be this spiritual warrior here and to really connect to a strong sense of realization and transformation. Remember, creativity is transformation, right? Because we're creating something, and creation means transformation. Something needs to be let go of in order to get there. But I think we're having a really hard time either letting go and for the transformation process, or seeing that creativity is a form of transformation and vice versa, which is, again, Venus and Pluto coming together today are really going to help activate this if we choose to see it for what it is. Now, in the heart of the moment, we have the Magi, the magician, number 1. Okay, this is Mercury. Now, you'll see that it's pointed out towards the last card, which is actually the Hanged Man. So we'll get to that. But what it's saying is that this creative potential, self-realization, the idea of manifestation, and the emotional and creative power of the soul must have a physical basis to be of real use and to set our powers free. Okay, physical basis, a material basis. What is the point of all of this mercurial energy and to be the Magi if it is not based in something physical that can manifest, right? What is the point of the Magi if there is nothing to manifest in the first place? And so it's showing here that we're going to be, this energy is really directed towards where we are headed. And it is not fully activated right now. And I think part of that is, number 1, we have blown out all of our energy to begin with this Knight of Wands, and really struggling to feel the inspiration and the transformative power and the spiritual will that fire represents. We kind of just blew it out, or we can't connect to it. We're having a hard time. And the Magi is here. This potential is here. The self-realization is here with this full moon. Absolutely. And with Mercury going retrograde and going towards the Hanged Man, the review period is very obvious as we go through this. But energetically, I would say our awareness here, so the 5 of Roses is the garden. You see these 2 children. Leo is very much about children and the childlike nature, playful and innocent. Children just express who they are without having any connection to how it impacts other people necessarily. They're very blunt sometimes and very joyful and optimistic if left to their own devices, and imaginative and creative as well. So when it's reversed like this, I mean, I just feel like that we're really having a hard time connecting to this quality of ourselves, because look at these kids. They are exploring. This this little girl is looking at a butterfly through a magnifying glass, so she's exploring and discovering. This little boy here, oops, sorry, he's got some sort of device to look off into the distance. He's also exploring and discovering. One is magnifying in on the detail. The other is looking out into the future. So you have these two aspects of the polarity of the masculine and feminine. One is reaching out. There's the sun, and the little girl is the moon. She's looking in and she's looking at the details. What does a butterfly represent? The metamorphosis, the change. He's looking out into the future, out into the distance, and they are safe. They're in their garden. They're surrounded by the natural world. They're surrounded by a wall of natures in some ways, and they feel safe and secure to express and to discover, to take risks. That is the fifth house, is to be a little daring. Now, they are young, so they're not that daring, but they feel safe. And I think that we're really struggling right now collectively and at the top of our awareness here to feel safe enough to explore, to feel safe enough to maybe look at some of the details, to discover some things, to be like children, right? Things are really serious. And again, that Knight of Wands is very serious warrior energy that is distorted, or we can't access it fully. And I think that it is, a little bit tyrannical in some ways, but however you look at it, we are not embodying the highest version of who we are in a spiritual sense for whatever reason. And this is why the full moon is so important, because it is showing us what we need to let go of and what we need to engage with. And already we're seeing that it has a lot to do with that innocent and playful and curious ability that children have to understand and explore the world around them in a sense of almost innocence and protection as well. At the root of things here, the King of Forces. The forces is the natural forces, of course. He's got the wolf, he's got a rabbit, he's got the elk all surrounding him. He's got this nebula, this violet nebula, the King of Forces. This is being very connected to the natural energy and having access to it as a result of being very connected to the earth. Now, when it's, again, reversed like this, there's depleted and scattered energy. Again, with the Knight of Wands, of course we have depleted and scattered energy. We've depleted and scattered it because we went in one big burst and now we don't really know what to do with ourselves. At the root of things energetically, there is a lot of depletion, scattered energy, not feeling very connected to the earth matrix, I would say, and that fire. The forces is the fire in this deck. And so we're really struggling to feel like the master of this domain within ourselves, right? The court cards represent people. And so at the root of this, I think we're really struggling to be this King of Forces, to be in complete trust and connection with the natural energy that this represents, right? And there is a trust and a strength here and an ability to bring seemingly opposite things together. You have a rabbit and a wolf there here with each other. They are very harmonious in this moment when they usually would be predator and prey. And so there is a peace that exudes from this as well, this King of Forces. But I think that we're, at the root of things energetically, we're really struggling, and there's a lot of scattered and depleted energy at the root of things. And, in our conscious awareness, when our thoughts and on our connection to source, I mean, we are really, again, struggling to feel safe enough to even explore, feel safe enough to be curious about the world around us, to look down at the details, to look out into the future at the same time, to take some social risks for ourselves, right? To be ourselves, to feel safe to be ourselves. Now, with the Magi heading to this direction, the Hanged Man, here's our Neptune and Pisces, right? There's a turning point coming. and a time to stop and assess and to and devote yourself. And it's overcoming the ego. So there's a maturity here as well. And there is a sacrificial element here, but with conviction, there's no real sacrifice. And it's about trusting and waiting and turning our heads down into the water and trusting this process. Neptune and Pisces, okay? Do we know that the table is set for us when the time is right? The Magi, the self-realization and the concept of manifestation with this Mercury retrograde is going to put us in a position where we have to kind of just like, I wouldn't say sit back necessarily, but, flip our perspective and be willing to hang from our convictions and allow ourselves to connect to the creative imagination that Pisces represents, right? Instead of actively trying to do anything, which again is hard for the Magi because that is all mercurial energy, right? It's all got connection to ideas and thoughts and manifestation, right? But with Mercury going retrograde, we're going to have to, this is really showing us that we're going into a period of, which is a turning point and a new sight. You get a new perspective when you flip upside down. And Mercury is going to absolutely give us a new perspective as it goes retrograde. And this full moon before this point is so important right now to be able to see truly who we are, as a result of letting go of all of the ideals that we project upon ourselves and the world outside of us as well, and be very realistic. So some guidance here coming into this moment as we we interact with these aspects here. Number one, the loving elementals, the Three of Roses, also reversed, right? We are not connecting to the inner child. We have to nurture the inner child. We have to nurture that part of ourselves that's able to see the elementals, that's able to trust that they are here around us, and to have this very innocent view of the world. This is a toddler, right? And this little toddler is like giggling and laughing because all of the fairies and stuff is around. They are all around this little human that has no reason to doubt anything. And so be as a child. And along with that is the unicorn, creative, indulge your creative, imaginative, and magical side through some sort of artistic expression. Even if it's just as simple as nourishing that inner child, and finding the activities that allow you to connect to that part of yourself is really important, because if we're not able to really feel like we can explore and that we can express ourselves and be sovereign, then we're not going to be able to really see things for what they are. That we'll keep projecting an ideal and then continue to be disappointed. And that is a big part of this full moon, as I said, is that we get to see things for what they really are and see that we're coming out of this crisis moment, and that creativity is transformation. And to connect to this creativity, if we want to be able to feel safe enough to explore and be curious and to discover aspects about the world that we may not have been able to because we've been so caught up in this like Knight of Wands warrior energy. Now, when it comes to the Knight of Forces, the honeybee says, let compassion and forgiveness be your top priority. I would say also on yourself, scattered energy. Not just for you either as well. Everybody's energy is probably scattered right now. There are very few people that can, even the most seasoned truth teller, even the most seasoned channeler, whatever, spiritual person, reader, inspiring person, even the most seasoned, none of us are really feeling that grounded right now. We have to actually work at it. And so be easy on yourself. Let compassion and forgiveness be your top priority. That is the best way to really get your energy much more grounded and less scattered and depleted, is to be compassionate and forgiving. That's, again, part of the Pisces element, is because when you can actually experience things as others experience them, emotionally and intuitively and in your feelings, right? The water, then you can, then your energy isn't scattered. You can be compassionate. You can have forgiveness, and you're not depleted, right? You're not depleted at that point, because you realize that your source of energy comes from something so much deeper and greater than what is outside of you. But I would also say, just be easy on yourself. Be compassionate, be forgiving towards yourself, even if you feel scattered and depleted. We're all on this journey of awakening, each individual person. Again, Leo is the individual sovereign self expressing themselves, being a channel for divine expression. That's the fullest version of it. When we're all doing that, then the Aquarian aspect comes into full alignment, and it's not just a collectivism that is void of individuality. And on top of that, too, the Archangel Gabriel, number 3, the messenger of God, again, has the crest of Mercury. Again, being reversed like this, open yourselves up to the message, right? The message of Mercury, especially going retrograde, to be aware that there is going to be a lot that we learn in this retrograde time. And, allow yourself to hear the messages. And this will also work, in conjunction with the fact that we may feel scattered and depleted right now. And part of it too is that we are not connecting to our own source of communication. We're not maybe being honest with ourselves, and we're not speaking our truth either. But I also would say that with this retrograde and how connected Gabriel is to Mercury in terms of communication and messages, and going into a retrograde, I would say that just there's information here to be learned and to be mindful of that. And again, be compassionate, be forgiving. Everybody's energy is scattered. I guarantee you there aren't really that many people on this planet right now that don't have something that is uprooting them energetically on some level. And this full moon, again, is showing us what we can let go of and what we have learned so far, what has culminated for each of us so far, that allows us to create the world we want to be in through transformation. We are transforming in every moment. It's happening. It's a dynamic process. So that's the full moon reading today. Let's see how it's going over here. We're looking at 50 minutes so far, so I think I've talked enough. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you found this helpful and useful. If you you can reach out on Telegram, Facebook. Everything you need is in the description box below. You can book a reading at the website, also in the description box. Please consider subscribing, smashing that like button. It helps get this information out on the YouTubes. I do put these videos on Odyssey, apparently not this one because I didn't hit record. That's such a bummer. But I will be making it available. It's obviously on YouTube. And feel free to share if you think this would help other people. And I love you guys. Thank you for being here. It really motivates me to keep going, knowing it's always funny too, because there's some days that I'm just like, I just don't want it. Why am I even doing this? Right? Why am I doing this? And then somebody makes a comment that's just like, I really needed that today. And I'm like, okay, that's why I'm doing it. So if you make an impact on even one person, you know that you're here for a reason. And if we all could think that way and kind of live our lives in that way, imagine where we could be if we were able to do that. So thank you so much for being here. have an illuminating and creatively transformative full moon. We'll be checking in tomorrow for the daily medicine, and I'll be getting some astrology out for the rest of this lunar cycle up until the new moon, so we know what to expect. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.